basically looking at assessing the health of our benthic rocky reef ecosystems. Now I'm just going to take you through a little bit of the thinking behind my PhD and the ideas behind it, as it's very much still in the planning phase. So just a bit of history into this type of research that we're doing in South Africa, and what we've done so far and what we plan to do moving forward. So so just a bit of the ideas and the thinking. So rocky reef ecosystems, which we've now seen from Lauren. I'm actually quite sad that I didn't speak to her before and asked to share some of her beautiful photos, because now mine are looking a bit sad. But nevertheless, these are coming from our underwater cameras. So the question is, where do we have these healthy, functioning, thriving ecosystems, and how much of it is left? That's what we're trying to look at. Do we have reefs that you can see on the left that are abundant? Are they diverse? Are they healthy? Do we have these nice big predators? Do we have thriving invertebrate communities? Do we have different trophic levels? Or do we in fact actually have these degraded reefs? Have they undergone regime shifts? Do we see damage to the reefs themselves? Do we see more of abundance of your lower trophic level species? So these are the questions that we're actually trying to address. We don't actually know a lot of these answers. So this is the original start of the thinking of this project. But why do we care? There's always this why question. So why do we want to actually go out there and look at the health and the condition and to determine where we find these healthy reef ecosystems along our coastline? Now, just to put it into a bit of a broad perspective, okay, we know, and I know a lot of people in this audience know this, but the ocean is extremely valuable, provides us with goods and services that benefits humans, and it contributes to the human well-being. And I know that it's sad to always come back to humans and how we have to utilize it, but that's a reality. And we have to learn how to use our resources and manage our ecosystem sustainably so we can preserve it for future generations. And we see this time and again, without going into the finer details here, but we see it in the stats, in the literature, in reports. We see the value of our oceans, but also we see the damage to our reef ecosystems. We see all these cumulative impacts and these pressures acting on a natural environment, and we need to learn how to sustainably manage them and preserve our important ecosystems in South Africa. Can you guys hear me? Okay. So how do we do this? One of the ways, at quite a broad spatial scale, at a national scale, is through the National Biodiversity Assessment. Thank you. Oh. And within this, we have two main headline indicators. One being how threatened are our ecosystems, and number two, how well protected are our ecosystems. Now, these are two headline indicators that we use to assess at quite a broad spatial scale. And then my project, for example, and then along with multiple other projects, will feed into this bigger picture. So now focusing on ecosystem threat status, as you can see, they are grouped into these 4 categories, ranging from critically endangered down to least threatened. But why ecosystem condition is important is because these ecosystem threat status levels are based on the ecosystem condition itself. So for example, we have these threshold values. If you have less than 20% of your ecosystems in good, healthy condition, then less than 20% of it, then they will be valued as critically endangered. Versus if you have more than 80% of your ecosystems in good condition, then they're classified as least threatened. So it's critical to understand the condition and the status of these reef ecosystems so that it can feed into this bigger picture assessment that we're trying to use to manage our ecosystems and our resources adequately. So let's take a look at what we have in the meantime. So this is the condition map that we have for South Africa. So this has been done from previous national biodiversity assessments. This one comes from the 2011 NBA. And this is the condition map that we have at quite a broad scale. You can see it's quite coarse. We have 3 categories of good, fair, and poor condition. So already that's quite coarse. And then we also have it at quite a broad scale. So we use these 1-degree blocks that we've used along in the maps that we assess condition. So again, we're missing the finer details of condition at, for example, the ecosystem level. So this is where I'm going to hopefully come in and address some of these questions. Now, another problem is that that's not actually a condition map. What it is a proxy map, essentially, because for obvious reasons, we can't go out into the ocean and collect data for every ecosystem, every reef on the benthic and pelagic environment. It's just impossible, and we know that. Unlike estuaries and freshwater systems where you can actually go out there more regularly. So what we had to do for a national scale is actually use a proxy method where we use cumulative impacts as a proxy for ecosystem condition. So where you have a lot of pressures and a high intensity of impacts acting on an ecosystem, you expect that it would be in poor condition. Vice versa, if you have less intensity, fewer impacts, maybe not so many human pressures in that area, you would actually expect those ecosystems to be more healthy. So that's the idea behind it. I'm not going to go into this equation, I know it looks quite scary, but it's based on this idea on this paper published in 2008 by Ben Halpin et al. And basically what you do is you get a cumulative impact score, which takes into account a whole range of pressures, whether it be fishing, mining, ecotourism, whatever it is, and it takes into account an intensity value for those pressures, and also an impact weight based on the actual impact that it has on the ecosystem and also the recovery potential of the ecosystem. So if that pressure is removed, how well can these ecosystems recover? So that's just to give you a broad outline of how this has been done so far around the country. This is just to give you an idea, for example, on your hard ground. So this is done for every ecosystem type, and we had 27 pressures in total. So each pressure will have a different cumulative impact score acting on that, and this is done for each one of those grid blocks on the map that we saw. And then we use these cumulative impact scores to determine the ecosystem threat status and to produce this good, fair, or poor condition map. So like I said, this is where I will hopefully come in. And now we need to start ground truthing this map and looking at it at a finer scale. And now my idea is that we're going to use a data-derived assessment of condition and start going out there and actually looking where it says we're supposed to have good, healthy, thriving ecosystems. Is that actually the case? And when we go out there, do we have these functioning reefs with a lot of different trophic levels and size structures? So the idea behind it is that we want to look at indicators of conditions. So your size structure, is it key species, different functional traits, and then we want to develop an ecosystem condition index. And now this is very important for communication, especially to management and policy. If you can just end up communicating like one value as opposed to a whole bunch of stats, it's very important. So if we can get a standardized index that we can use and apply at a broader scale, it'll be very important for communicating our findings. And like I said, it's going to be done at a finer scale, so we're going to focus in on a certain region along the coastline. We use a functional trait-based approach, so whereby we will still be looking at different species, but we're going to try to group them into different traits and see the kind of functional responses of these ecosystems. Now another important idea is this idea of developing reference conditions. We need to know what almost a baseline, it's not really an actual baseline, but we need these reference conditions to compare against areas where we have a lot of impacts and cumulative impacts affecting the ecosystems. So that's the idea behind my project, or one part of it. So just to give you an idea, some of the research questions, one being what is the condition, or what are the condition of these reefs, these subtidal rocky reefs? Secondly, can we use marine protected areas to develop these reference conditions? Then what are the key indicators of rocky reef ecosystem condition? We're using a functional trait-based approach. And then what are the effects of cumulative pressures on the structure and function, so we can start to tease out those important factors, whether it be fishing or whether it be extractive use, just general harvesting, or whether it's mining or whatever it is, we can start to manage those in a better way. And then lastly, to develop a standardized condition index to apply at a broader scale, which is very important for the end stages where you're trying to communicate your findings. So using marine protected areas, we're going to focus in KZN, in the Natal bioregion in particular. So just to zoom in a bit closer, this is where we're going to focus for one component of my project. And the MPAs that we'll be using will be the Alawal Shoal and then the Ponderland MPA. So the idea is that these sections over here that are outside the marine protected areas, those will be your impacted areas. So those will be exploited areas where you would expect there to be more poor ecosystems compared to inside the marine protected areas where we have no-take, completely no-take zones, but also no-take zones. So you have a little bit of pressures acting in those areas. So the idea is that we have a continuum or gradient of pressures that we can now compare the condition of the reefs to these pressures acting in the area. So the way we're going to do this, and Lauren has provided quite a nice introduction to these methods, so I'm not going to go into too much detail, but you kind of get the gist of it, I think, already. So it's going to be using remote imagery techniques, which is cost-effective and non-destructive to the environment, which I think is very important. So your baited remote stereo video systems, which we now have a better idea of what they are, and then the drop camera where you use a GoPro to take pictures of the benthic environment. So Those are going to be our method techniques. And from this, we're going to be able to look at not only the fish, but also the benthic sessile macrofauna community. So from the drop camera, we can look at what's happening on the bottom, your invertebrate species. And then with your fish community data, we can look at the relative abundance and diversity, and also importantly, the size structure, which is also important traits. So that's the type of data we're going to be collecting in these areas to address these questions. So like I said, the idea is to look at an ecosystem approach, to look at the community as a whole instead of focusing on one or two species, and trying to get a broader picture of these ecosystems for the fish and your macrofauna. Assess the functional structure. So looking at functional traits. So do we have bigger groups present? Do we have those with certain reproductive states? Is it your big reproductive females that are actually found in these good condition reefs? So looking at the overall functional structure and how the effects impact on this functional structure. Very importantly, again, just developing these reference condition sites, which will be important to be able to compare along the coastline. And then teasing out these cumulative pressures and the effects that they are having in terms of ecosystem service provision. And then another thing that we want to do, which I think is very important, using predictive modeling, the idea is that because we're going to be focusing on quite a localized regional scale, we want to apply it at a more national scale, that it can feed into the national biodiversity assessment, hopefully towards the end of this. So if we now look at our condition of our reefs, and we model it to all the cumulative impact pressures that we have, like you saw previously of those 27 pressures, for example, if we can get finer scale data of that and model it to a broader scale, we can now look at, okay, where do we expect, using data-derived information, where can we actually predict that we'll see good, healthy, functioning ecosystems versus more poorer, degraded ecosystems. And this is important for management, especially as we try to increase our MPA network and expand our protective areas or different management policies. So yeah, so like I said, this is going to ground truth the current MPA condition map at a finer scale that we will hopefully be able to scale up. It's going to inform the national biodiversity assessment and also inform management and policy, especially with our condition indices, which I think will be very important at the end of this. And obviously this all feeds into general meeting biodiversity and conservation targets, which I think we're all well aware of by now. So I wanted to play this video, which I'm not very technologically advanced, it didn't work, so I'm stuck with some less average photos compared to Laura's. But anyway, we're just hoping that we can keep our reefs looking healthy with lots of fish, big reproductive females, and keeping our service provision and just using our resources in a sustainable way so that we can keep it for generations to come. So thank you very much.